The air was thick with the scent of Seraphina's power and the metallic tang of Kale's impending shame. He stood before the shadow wing, the silence of the conquered city amplifying the frantic drumming of his own heart. The ultimatum had been delivered, blood bond or the blood extinction of his people. Kale looked past Seraphina to the cowering healer, Elara, whose face was a mirror of his people's terror. He could save them. But the cost was himself. His hands, once wielding the sword of a kingdom, were now shackled in unbreakable iron, yet the heaviest chains were invisible, the chains of responsibility. He lowered his head, not in submission to her, but in surrender to the grim necessity. "I accept your terms, Lady Seraphina." Kale's voice was rough, choked with the dust of the fallen. "I will be your warbride. Spare Erthos." A collective gasp rose from the few surviving mortal attendants forced to witness this mockery. Seraphina's lips curved into a tiny, victorious, utterly chilling smile. It was the smile of a predator who knows the prey has walked willingly into the snare. Wise choice, mortal. Survival often requires a temporary loss of pride. She gestured, and the vampire guard released Elara, pushing her roughly back into the crowd of captives. The message was clear. The terms are met. For now. A tall, elderly vampire, cloaked in robes of midnight velvet, stepped forward. This was Lord Cashin, Seraphina's ancient ritualist and advisor, a creature whose eyes held the cold wisdom of centuries. He carried the heavy silver chalice and a thin, wickedly sharp ritual dagger, both glowing faintly with an unnatural internal red light. The ritual was not to be performed in the open square. Seraphina commanded Kale to be taken to the citadel's deepest chamber, a place known to mortals as the Crypt of Binding. Kale was led through the sprawling, Gothic architecture of the citadel, which was now draped with the oppressive banners of the Kalan Empire, a crimson claw grasping a crescent moon. Every turn, every dark corridor, was a reminder of his new reality. The Crypt of Binding was not a crypt of the dead, but of promises. The room was vast, circular, and carved from black basalt. The only illumination came from torches that burned with an unnerving green flame and the ambient glow of the red moon filtering through a massive stained glass window depicting a serpentine creature wrapped around a sun. In the center was a raised stone altar, surrounded by columns carved with disturbing esoteric symbols. Seraphina stood waiting on the altar, her wings slightly retracted, her demeanor that of a goddess preparing to accept a sacrifice. She had removed her heavy armored gauntlets, revealing hands that were delicate but unervingly strong. Lord Cashin began to chant in the dead, guttural language of the ancient Kalan, the sounds echoing and vibrating through Kale's chest. The green flames flickered wildly. Seraphina fixed Kale with her gaze, a deep, searching look that seemed to probe the very marrow of his bones. "The blood bond is not a mere contract, Kale Erthos," she stated, her voice low and intimate, a sound that should have been comforting but was purely menacing. "It is a joining of essence. You will become an extension of my will, a protector of my domain, and an oath against my enemies. And if I refuse at this final moment?" Kale challenged, his pride flaring one last time. "Then your corpse will be scattered before the dawn, and the promise I made to spare Erthos will be void," Seraphina replied instantly, without heat or passion. "The fate of your people is bound to your obedience. Now kneel." Kale's knees locked. He would not kneel to her. A ripple of frustration crossed Seraphina's perfect features. She did not physically force him. Instead, Lord Cashin's chanting suddenly intensified, and Kale felt a sharp, agonizing pressure behind his eyes, a phantom pain that brought him staggering forward. He bit back a cry, his muscles twitching. He lowered himself to one knee, a gesture of respect to the ritual, not to his captor. Seraphina moved with the swift grace of a striking viper. She produced the dagger, the same one seen in the thumbnail, thin and obsidian sharp, and extended her hand. Lord Cashin held the chalice ready. "You must offer the first taste, mortal. The offering must be made of your own will." Kale stared at the dagger, then at the chalice, a swirl of dark, viscous liquid already coating its inner silver. This is it. The last moment of his true freedom. He took the dagger from her hand. The cold metal against his palm felt like truth. He looked up, his eyes meeting Seraphina's scarlet gaze, a gaze that was neither hateful nor alluring but simply expectant. He didn't hesitate this time. He pressed the blade's tip hard against the flesh of his left forearm. With a swift, clean motion, he dragged it across his skin, opening a deep, crimson line. The pain was sharp, but the sting of humiliation was worse. The blood welled up, bright and warm against the cold stone of the crypt. He tilted his arm over the chalice. His life's essence, the very thing he fought to protect, spilled into the silver cup, mixing with the dark liquid already there. Seraphina watched the drip, her eyes darkening with a predatory hunger that was barely constrained. Now the demand is answered, she whispered. She took the chalice from Cashin, holding it up. The combined liquids glowed with a fierce, unstable red light. The chalice vibrated in her hand. She then placed her own long, elegant finger against the jagged wound in his arm. Cale gasped, not from pain, but from the sudden, scorching chill of her touch, like ice burning. She pressed hard, drawing a fresh bead of his blood. "My turn," she murmured. Before Cale could react, Seraphina used the dagger to make an identical, symmetrical cut on her own pale, inner forearm. Her blood, thick and unnaturally dark, immediately began to seep out. She pressed her bleeding arm over the chalice. "The bond is a circle, Warbride," she intoned, her voice suddenly echoing with a deep, magical resonance. "My power demands your life. Your will demands my protection. Drink now and the oath is sealed." She held the chalice toward him. Cale knew this was the point of no return. His soul was about to be mortgaged. He took the heavy, cold chalice in his shackled hands. The liquid within pulsed with a fierce, hungry light. He raised it to his lips, his gaze locked with Seraphina's. He saw something in her eyes then, a flicker of vulnerability, a profound ancient necessity that went beyond conquest. She needed this as much as he needed the protection it offered his people. He swallowed the blood. It tasted of earth, fire, and something sharp and metallic, laced with an intoxicating, overwhelming power. The moment the last drop passed his throat, a blinding, scarlet energy erupted from the chalice. It slammed into Cale's chest, throwing him back against the stone altar. He cried out, but the sound was trapped in his throat. He felt the magic of the bond snap into place, a searing, electric connection to Seraphina's mind, a sudden surge of strength, and a clear, terrifying knowledge that he was no longer his own. He looked at Seraphina, who was now trembling slightly, her eyes wide. The bond had taken hold. "It is done," she breathed, her voice a mix of exhaustion and triumph. She dropped to her knees beside him, her scarlet eyes burning into his. The magic subsided, leaving Cale physically drained but spiritually hyper-aware. His senses were unnaturally sharp. He could hear the drip of water 5 corridors away. Seraphina rose, her composure instantly restored. She looked down at him, a new kind of ownership in her gaze. "Rise, Cale. You are no longer merely a prisoner. You are my consort. My Warbride. My bondmate." Cale stood, feeling the subtle, unwelcome increase in his strength, the phantom tug on his soul. The scar on his arm, the mark of the bond, was already closed, leaving a thin, silver-white line. "What is your first command, lady?" he asked, the words hollow, yet the question compelled by the bond itself. Seraphina moved closer, her crimson eyes gleaming with cold, calculated purpose. She reached out and traced the silver scar on his arm. "Your people are weak, Cale. My court is treacherous," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that only he could hear. "My first command is this: survive. And destroy the rivals who seek to break our bond." Her final instruction, the true demand, the real core of the conflict, was delivered with a terrifying intimacy. "Prove to my court that you are worthy of my blood, or I will use the bond to end you myself." Cale ob Seraphina ka official consort ban chukatha. Magar is nay title any use dushmanan se gerliatha. Seraphina ki adalat court, sapan se bari huiti. The morning after the ritual was a symphony of suffocating silence and sharp whispers. Cale was granted quarters befitting Seraphina's consort, luxurious, yet heavily guarded, a gilded cage. His armor was replaced with tailored, dark velvet attire, but the change was merely cosmetic. He felt the invisible chains of the blood bond far heavier than his old shackles. His first formal appearance in the Hall of Shadows, the main court of the Citadel, was designed as a brutal test. The vampire lords and ladies, creatures of immense age and lethal vanity, scrutinized him with undisguised contempt. They saw him as a weak, temporary toy, a final insult to the defeated human race. The most dangerous among them was Lord Varric, a formidable vampire general with hair the color of polished mahogany and eyes like cold embers. Varric had openly coveted the position of Seraphina's consort for centuries. He stood apart, his disdain a palpable force. Seraphina was seated on her throne, an image of regal indifference. She barely acknowledged Cale's presence, forcing him to stand slightly behind her, exposed to the court's cruel judgment. Varric was the first to strike. He initiated a formal challenge, cloaked in the veneer of respect. "My lady Seraphina," Varric's voice was smooth as poison. "I question the wisdom of placing a defeated mortal at your strategic side. The blood bond offers protection, not competence. How is General Cale to assist in the governance of the conquered territories? His kind is known only for weak sentiment and feudal resistance." The court chuckled, their amusement razor-sharp. Cale felt his humiliation rise, but the chilling sensation of the blood bond, a mental whisper in his mind that sounded suspiciously like, "Control your fury, Warbride, or I will do it for you," kept him still. Seraphina finally spoke, her voice lethally calm. "Cale Aerthos is bound by a ritual stronger than your loyalty, Varric. His mind is his weapon. Prove that your judgment is superior, Lord, or hold your silence." Varric seized the opportunity. He presented a major problem. A vital trade route through a contested mountain pass, recently lost to a savage, nomadic tribe, not vampires, a third, minor enemy. The route was essential for supplying Seraphina's armies. "I propose we send 2 legions and raise the pass," Varric suggested, a brute force approach. Cale saw the trap. A 2-legion attack would be costly in troops and time, exactly what Varric needed to diminish Seraphina's resources. The bond compelled Cale to speak. "My lady," Cale stepped forward, drawing all eyes to him. His human intellect, sharp and strategic, cut through the vampire's arrogance. A frontal assault on a mountain pass is costly. The nomadic tribes fight for survival. We do not need to raise it. We need to starve it. Block the 2 minor rivers that feed their main encampment, offer the tribesmen food and safe passage only if they surrender the pass. It saves blood, time, and gains us future laborers." A collective, stunned silence fell. It was a strategy of cold, unfeeling logic, a vampire's way of thinking delivered by a mortal. Seraphina's scarlet eyes met Cale's. For the first time, a flicker of something like approval crossed her features. "A strategy worthy of the Caelan Empire," she pronounced, her verdict absolute. "Varric, you will coordinate the blockade as General Cale has instructed. You are dismissed." Varric's retreat was a picture of contained fury. Cale had won the first round, but he had earned a powerful, eternal enemy. Later that evening in Cale's chambers, Seraphina appeared without warning, her wings melting out of the shadows. She was no longer in armor but in a flowing midnight blue gown, a sight that was dangerously distracting. "You performed adequately in the court, Warbride," she said, pacing the room slowly. "You think like a predator. A commendable trait for a human." "I think like a general who values efficiency over needless slaughter," Cale corrected, leaning against a cold marble pillar, refusing to be intimidated by her beauty or proximity. "I saved your legions, lady. That is not loyalty. That is strategic self-interest." "Honesty," she mused, stopping directly in front of him. "Another rare trait. Varric will attempt to eliminate you. Not with a duel but with a whisper in the dark." Cale felt the heat of her presence, the raw, ancient power radiating off her. "I have survived worse enemies than a jealous lover, lady, and my life is bound to yours. His failure will be your loss." Seraphina reached out and gently touched the silver scar on his forearm, sending a familiar, electric surge through him. The touch lingered. "The bond is a protection but it is also a weakness. If I am wounded you feel the pain and vice versa. It is not an invincible shield." She looked away, a momentary darkening in her eyes. "There are enemies far older and stronger than Varric. Enemies who despise this bond, enemies who once brought my entire family to ruin." This was a profound, unscripted moment of vulnerability. Cale realized Seraphina was not just a conqueror, she was a survivor burdened by massive responsibility and pain. He saw the crack in her impenetrable armor. "What enemies?" Cale pressed gently. Seraphina turned back, her eyes hardening, the crack sealed. The moment of intimacy was gone. "The questions you ask are reserved for equal partners, Warbride. You have only earned my temporary respect. But you will earn more." She stepped back, her wings unfurling partially in the low light. "A test awaits you tomorrow. A rogue element is attempting to incite rebellion in the occupied city of Lyra. You will go with a small force and pacify the area. Show me your effectiveness without the shield of my presence." "Pacify?" Cale asked, his voice low with suspicion. "What does that entail?" Seraphina's answer was chilling, a perfect summary of their dark alliance. "Achieve absolute control, General. By any means necessary. But ensure that not one drop of Caelan blood is spilled. The mortal blood is disposable, mine is not. This is your first independent assignment. Do not fail." She vanished into the shadows, leaving Cale alone in the luxurious, silent room, gripping the scar on his arm. His first assignment was a test of his moral fiber, his loyalty, and his skill. He was meant to be a symbol, but he was quickly becoming Seraphina's most dangerous weapon. Cale's mission to Lyra was his first independent test under the bond, a cruel choice between his humanity and his new role. He was sent with a small detachment of vampire elite guards, cold, efficient executioners who watched him as closely as they watched the populace. The city of Lyra was once a thriving trade hub, now a skeletal picture of resistance. The air was heavy with unspoken defiance. Kale, dressed in the dark, official attire of a Kaelan general, rode through the streets, feeling the burning glares of the mortals. He was a human who had sold his soul, and they saw him as the ultimate betrayer. His mind was constantly vigilant. The blood bond was a living thing, a low, rhythmic pulse in his veins that made him acutely aware of Seraphina's remote presence, a feeling akin to always having a commander looking over his shoulder. His task was to squash the rogue element, a resistance cell called the Shadow Hand that was printing inflammatory pamphlets and hoarding confiscated rations. The goal was to achieve control without spilling vampire blood, and preferably without the wholesale slaughter of humans, which Kale still desperately wanted to avoid. Kale's vampire escort located the printing press in an old, abandoned church. Kale ordered the siege, but his internal alarm bells were ringing. The setup was too easy. As Kale approached the church doors, the psychic whisper from the bond intensified, a sudden jolt of frantic urgency that wasn't his own. It was Seraphina's residual warning: danger. Ambush. He stopped his detachment just outside the church. Hold, he commanded, his voice sharp with authority. This is a trap. The building is wired to collapse. The goal is to kill the vampire escorts, not incite a riot. The lead vampire guard, a brute named Lord Gorik, sneered. A mortal fearing a few sticks of dynamite? Move, Warbride, or I will report your cowardice to the Shadow Wing. Kale made a split-second decision. He was bound to Seraphina, and her primary command was, ensure that not one drop of Kaelan blood is spilled. If he let them proceed, he would fail the test and his people would pay the price. He turned, drawing the dagger he always carried, a simple, sharp weapon hidden beneath his cloak. He didn't aim for Gorik, but for the main support beam of a dilapidated balcony above Gorik's head. With a powerful, unexpected surge of the bond-enhanced strength, Kale threw the dagger. The beam splintered and the balcony crashed down, narrowly missing Gorik and blocking the church entrance. The building is unstable, Lord Gorik, Kale stated, his eyes cold and unwavering. My primary command is to protect the Kaelan blood. I've secured the perimeter and prevented an attack on your lives. We starve them out. Gorik, enraged but alive, could not dispute the action. Kale had followed the letter of Seraphina's command, saving the vampire lives, but using a very human, calculated risk. The next day the Shadow Hand cell, starving and dehydrated, surrendered. Among them, Kale recognized a young woman named Lyra, the historical name of the city's founder, often used as a code name. She was the leader, fierce, defiant, and refusing to break. Kale interrogated her alone in the prison cellar. You risked your lives for pamphlets, Kale said, his voice quiet. A foolish effort. You know you can't win. We know the price of surrender, General Kale, she spat. You are living proof. A chained dog. A betrayer of your own race. Her words were a physical blow. Kale forced himself to maintain the mask of the conqueror. Your life has value unlike the words you print, Kale countered. I was sent here to pacify. That means I can make an example of you or I can use you. Give me the names of your financial backers, the ones who provided the weapons, and you and your cell will be assigned as laborers to Seraphina's estates. Survival. Not execution. Lyra's defiance wavered. Why would you spare us? You hate the vampires, yet you serve. Kale looked away, his eyes resting on the shackles on her wrists. My choices are no longer my own. But I will use the power I have to save what I can. Give me the information. Prove that human life can be useful even to them. Lyra, seeing the genuine conflict in his eyes, realized this was not a simple executioner. She saw an avenue for future resistance. She gave him the names, not of true resistance fighters, but of two corrupt human nobles who were secretly profiting from the trade route disruption, the very thing Varric had complained about. Kale's lips curved into a cold, strategic smile. He had his leverage. Kale returned to the Citadel and presented his report to Seraphina. He detailed the ambush, Gorik's near-fatal mistake, and his swift action to save the vampire lives. He then presented the names of the two human nobles as the main instigators behind the financial backing of the Lyra resistance. The crisis is averted, my lady, Kale concluded. The city is pacified. And not a single drop of Kaelan blood was spilled. Seraphina listened, her expression unreadable. She knew he had hidden something, the truth of the dynamite, the true leadership of the resistance. The bond did not give her a full mind read, but it gave her a sense of his emotional concealment. You handled the situation with an unexpected economy of force, General, she conceded, a flicker of appreciation in her eyes. You have proved your strategic worth, if not your full transparency. She then did the unexpected. She stepped closer and gently pressed her fingertip to his temple. Kale felt a terrifying cold surge of her power rushing through his mind, not to control but to share information. Kale's mind was flooded with images, a ruined ancient battlefield under a violet sky. Seraphina as a child, her face etched with terror, watching a powerful, gargantuan creature, not a vampire but something older, darker, tearing apart her family's castle. A whispered, agonizing name, the Elder Ones. The revelation that the blood bond was not just to protect her, but to shield both of them from a greater magical entity that preyed on powerful, solitary beings. The vision vanished. Kale was left breathless, reeling. The blood bond is a weapon against the coming darkness, Kale. Seraphina's voice was now heavy with the weight of ancient fear. You think I bonded you for conquest? I bonded you for survival. Varric and his like are obsessed with thrones. I am obsessed with preventing the end of everything. The Shadow Hand, the mortals, the vampires, we are nothing when the Elder Ones return. She looked at him, her eyes pleading for understanding, a confession more potent than any love declaration. Now do you understand your purpose, Warbride? We are the only two people alive who can stop the true shadow. And you have a choice: continue your games of loyalty, or help me prepare for a war you cannot fathom. Seraphina's revelation about the Elder Ones, ancient, extra-dimensional entities that devour magic and life, changed everything for Kale. His battle was no longer against a single vampire queen, but against the true extinction of his world. The knowledge sat heavily in his mind, amplified by the blood bond, which made Seraphina's fear a muted, constant hum in his soul. For the next few weeks, the dynamics between Kale and Seraphina shifted drastically. The relationship moved from captor and prisoner to uneasy co-conspirators. Their meetings were now focused on strategy, not subordination. Kale used his knowledge of the mortal world to fortify the Citadel's supply lines and defense mechanisms, while Seraphina dedicated her time to ancient texts and forgotten rituals. He was her tactical shield, she was his source of power and information. One evening, Kale found Seraphina in the Citadel's high tower library, a vast room of scrolls and forbidden lore. She was not in her armor but in simple, flowing robes, her white hair unbound. She was poring over a delicate, ancient scroll that seemed to be actively resisting her touch. The Elder Ones are drawn to raw power, Seraphina explained without looking up. My ancestors created the blood bond ritual centuries ago, not just to control vassals, but to cloak the combined power of two unique bloodlines. Your blood, General, is a pure catalyst. Bound to mine, it creates a magical signature too faint for them to track immediately. So, I am not your Warbride but your shield generator, Kale stated, the truth stinging yet rational. And if the bond is broken, we both become exposed. Exactly, she confirmed, finally looking up, her scarlet eyes heavy with weariness. And Varric, obsessed with usurping my throne, is trying to break this bond through politics or assassination. He thinks I bonded you out of weakness or lust. As if summoned by her words, the political maneuvering turned deadly. That night, an attempt was made on Kale's life. He was ambushed by two elite, hooded vampire assassins, not Seraphina's guard but clearly Varric's mercenaries, who tried to poison his evening wine. Kale's bond-enhanced senses screamed the warning. He didn't drink the wine. Instead, he feigned illness, creating a distraction, and used his superior human combat speed and agility to disarm and incapacitate one assassin. The second assassin, realizing the failure, aimed a silver stake, a lethal threat to a bonded partner, at Kale's heart. At that precise moment, Kale felt an agonizing, piercing pain that was not his own. It was the bond transmitting Seraphina's pain directly into his mind. A psychic strike, a sudden, blinding headache. Seraphina had been alerted by the bond's disturbance and was attempting to subdue the attacker telepathically from her own chamber, projecting her rage through their link. The assassin faltered, clutching his head, giving Kale the split second he needed. Kale used the silver stake on the assassin, neutralizing the threat. Minutes later, Seraphina burst into his chambers, her face pale, her composure ruffled. She saw the dead assassins and Kale leaning heavily against the wall, clutching his head. You felt it, she whispered, confirming the shared agony. The cost of the bond being stretched. Varric's treachery is growing bolder. Kale looked at her, his expression a mix of pain and growing understanding. The bond protects us but it doesn't choose sides. If I die you suffer and if you are distracted I am exposed. We are now chained to each other's survival. Seraphina moved toward him, a raw, protective fury blazing in her eyes. The power of her vampire nature was overwhelming. She reached out, her hand tracing the faint silver line of the bond on his forearm. Your strategy in Lyra, your swift action tonight, you are proving to be more than a shield, Kale. You are a necessity. Kale, exhausted and pushed to his limit, didn't want respect. He wanted honesty. He reached up, grasping her wrist, his gaze fiercely defiant. Then stop treating me like an artifact. If we are to survive the Elder Ones, we must be equal. You must tell me everything, he demanded. Their intense proximity, the shared near-death experience, and the raw power thrumming between them via the bond culminated in a moment of pure, forbidden passion. Seraphina's eyes darkened, not with hunger for blood, but with a terrifying, ancient hunger for connection. She released his arm and, with a swift, powerful move, closed the final distance. She kissed him. It was not a gentle, romantic kiss. It was a vampire's kiss, dominating, possessive, and overwhelming. The psychic link exploded with sensation, pain, power, ancient sorrow, and a desperate, burning desire to possess and be possessed. Cale felt the intoxicating rush of their combined essences, the deep, primal connection of the blood bond, now activated not by ritual but by passion. The kiss broke as abruptly as it began. Seraphina stepped back, breathing hard, her eyes wide, shocked by her own impulse. That, she stated, her voice trembling slightly, was a warning. The bond amplifies everything, Cale. Control your desires, or I will use that vulnerability against you. Cale, shaken to his core, simply met her gaze, his own eyes burning with a sudden, powerful defiance that was fueled by his own rising desire. You fear the bond, lady? Cale challenged, his voice husky. Because it makes you feel human again. And I will use that fear against you. The intense, unexpected moment of the kiss solidified the new, volatile phase of Cale and Seraphina's relationship. It was now clear, the blood bond was not just a chain, it was a conduit for power, pain, and dangerous passion. Both were equally determined to ignore the attraction and focus on the coming war. Seraphina was now candid about their ultimate mission. They had to find the Sunstone of Lyra. They stood in the Citadel's private library, bending over a huge, ancient map drawn on cured dragon hide. Dragon hide. The Elder Ones cannot enter a domain protected by the Sunstone, Seraphina explained, tracing a line across a desolate, northern region known as the Cursed Wastes. It is an artifact forged in the heart of a dying star, capable of projecting a protective shield large enough to cover the entire continent. My family lost it centuries ago. And where is it now? Cale asked, his eyes already scanning the map, his mind calculating logistics and risks. It lies in the crypt of the Silent Watchers, deep within the Cursed Wastes, Seraphina revealed. A place guarded by forgotten ancient wards and creatures that even my legions fear. This journey must be undertaken quickly and alone. She looked at him with a predatory intensity. This is not a mission for armies, Cale. It is a quest for two unique souls bound by magic. The bond ensures we are stronger together, and our combined magical signature will be masked as we travel through the wastes. Cale knew this meant forced proximity, days and nights alone with the woman who held his life and soul in her hands, and whose sudden kiss still burned him. And Varric? He will notice your absence and seize the throne. Varric is predictable, Seraphina countered with cold certainty. I have spread rumors that I am undergoing a private, extensive ritual to strengthen the bond. Lord Cashin will act as regent. Your absence, Warbride, will be explained as accompanying me for support and sustenance. Their journey began under the veil of the blood moon. Seraphina was in her functional lightweight armor, her magnificent wings folded tightly. Cale was cloaked, armed with his human blades and his burgeoning bond-enhanced strength. The Cursed Wastes were a nightmare landscape, jagged black rock, air thick with sulfur, and swirling mist that disoriented mortal senses. The bond proved immediately vital. When a localized temporal distortion, a common danger in the wastes, threatened to separate them, Cale felt the panic in Seraphina's mind. Before he could fall into the rift, the bond surged, pulling him sharply back towards her, a strong invisible cord snapping taut. The wastes feed on isolation. Seraphina's voice was rough as she steadied herself. They try to break links. Stay close, Cale. The bond is our compass. Their relationship on the road was intensely pragmatic. They spoke only of strategy, supplies, and threats. Yet, the physical intimacy of their shared survival was overwhelming. When they slept, they had to remain within 50 feet of each other for the bond to maintain its strength. Cale would watch her as she rested, noting the faint human rise and fall of her chest beneath the black metal, realizing that she was far more than the conqueror he hated. Midway through the journey, they were attacked by a flock of shadow harpies, venomous, winged creatures. The ambush was fast and brutal. Seraphina unfolded her wings and took to the air, an image of breathtaking, deadly grace. Cale stayed on the ground, covering her flanks. A harpy lunged for Cale, and as he ducked, its poison talons ripped across Seraphina's wing mid-flight. A shockwave of agonizing pain slammed into Cale's mind. It was immediate, searing, and focused on his own shoulder, mirroring the wound on Serafina's wing. He cried out, staggering, his vision momentarily blurred. The poison. Serafina yelled from above, her voice tight with pain and fury. It affects us both. The bond, which protected them from isolation, also magnified their injuries. Kale fought through the blinding pain, his fear for Serafina overriding his own agony. He threw a grappling hook and pulled Serafina down to cover beside him. As he frantically applied an antiseptic poultice to her wing, their faces were inches apart. The fear of death, not just his own but the magnified fear of her death, created a terrifying sense of mutual need. Why didn't you dodge? Kale demanded, his hands shaking slightly as he worked on her wound. They were after your head, mortal, Serafina hissed, her body tense with controlled agony. The bond's first instinct is self-preservation. It forced me to protect the primary link. You are still the more vulnerable of the two of us. And you are the one with the wings. Kale shot back. The argument was fierce, not born of hatred but of desperate concern. As the initial danger passed, Kale found himself leaning into the warmth of her presence, and she did not pull away. The blood price of their bond was clear. They had to save each other whether they wanted to or not. As they rested that night in a shallow, magically shielded cave, Serafina's guard was severely lowered by the trauma. Kale noticed a small, faded scar on Serafina's neck, almost hidden by her hair. That scar, Kale began, his voice soft. It's old. Not from a battle. Serafina touched the spot, her eyes distant. A mark of my youth. Before the Elder Ones came from my house. Before I became the Shadow Wing. She revealed a painful truth. She was the youngest of 4 vampire siblings. The Sunstone had been her family's most sacred treasure. When the Elder One's shadow fell, her elder siblings, consumed by greed and fear, tried to use the Sunstone for their own power, instead of creating the shield. My family broke the original oath. They used power for conquest, not protection. And the Elder Ones devoured them one by one. I was the last, she confessed, her voice thick with ancient grief. I survived by fleeing and creating this empire, and by swearing never to trust anyone's blood but my own. Until you. She looked at Kale, her crimson eyes suddenly shining with unshed tears, a vulnerability he had never expected. I need that Sunstone, Kale. Not for power, but to finally fulfill the oath my foolish family betrayed. And I need your purity to cleanse the artifact's corruption. Kale looked at the powerful, broken queen beside him. He wasn't just a political pawn. He was the key to her salvation and the world's defense. His hatred had not vanished, but it was being slowly replaced by a fierce, protective complicity. After weeks of perilous travel across the cursed wastes, Kale and Serafina finally reached the location marked on the ancient map, the Crypt of the Silent Watchers. It was not a burial chamber but a massive, monolithic structure carved directly into the black rock of a desolate peak, designed to withstand the very forces of the Elder Ones. The entrance was guarded not by physical soldiers, but by a complex, pulsating magical ward, a shield of pure, invisible energy that repelled anything with a strong life force. Serafina stopped before the pulsating barrier. The ward was created to keep out the powerful. My vampire essence is too strong, it will repel me and alert every forgotten guardian in the wastes if I touch it, she explained. And me? Gil asked. Your blood is the key, Serafina said, her voice strained. It is human, pure, and currently cloaked by the bond. You must be the one to breach the ward. I will push my power through the blood bond and guide you. Kale felt the terrifying implication. He had to act as the conductive wire for Serafina's immense power. He nodded, accepting the impossible task. He placed his hand on the pulsating ward. An immediate, agonizing electric shock ran up his arm. The pain was brutal, but then the bond surged. Serafina pressed her palm against Kale's back, pouring her controlled, crimson power directly into their link. Kale roared as the two energies, human purity and vampire force, met and merged within him. He felt the bond stretch to its limit, transforming his pain into a focused, powerful surge. The ward sputtered, shimmered, and then cracked open, leaving a fissure just large enough for them to slip through. Inside, the crypt was vast, cold, and utterly silent. The air tasted of ozone and ancient magic. The halls were lined with statues of winged, armored figures, the eponymous Silent Watchers, their eyes carved from obsidian, staring into the darkness. Serafina warned him, these Watchers are magically linked. They will awaken if they detect aggression or the scent of blood not consecrated by the bond. They moved through the crypt with terrifying intimacy, their bodies constantly close, their movements synchronized. Kale's senses, heightened by the bond, allowed him to detect pressure plates and hidden traps before they triggered. Seraphina's centuries of knowledge guided them through the obscure runes and riddles. They reached a huge, circular chamber at the crypt's heart. In the center, suspended above a swirling vortex of shadow, was the artifact, the Sunstone of Lyra. It was magnificent, a large crystal that glowed with a warm, steady golden light, radiating life and healing energy. But the Sunstone was not alone. It was guarded by a powerful stone golem, a 10-foot giant brought to life by the crypt's magic. The golem's eyes were the same obsidian as the silent watchers. The golem attacked immediately. Its movements were slow but devastatingly powerful. "It is immune to my blood magic," Seraphina shouted, launching a powerful scarlet bolt that simply shattered against the golem's stone chest. "We must find the hidden mechanism to disable it." Kale took the initiative. He engaged the golem in close quarters, using his human agility to dance around its crushing blows. He was no match for its strength, but he used his speed to distract it, drawing it away from Seraphina. The fight was intense. Kale managed to locate a glowing blue rune on the back of the golem's neck, its power source. But to reach it he needed a clear shot. "Seraphina, snack. I need a clear line," Kale yelled, narrowly dodging a crushing blow that sent massive stone debris flying. Seraphina acted instantly. She didn't use a blast of magic. Instead, she used her raw physical strength. She flew at the golem's legs, slamming into it with the force of a battering ram, momentarily rocking the massive creature off balance. As the golem roared and stumbled, Kale leapt onto its back, using his enhanced bond strength to drive his small dagger deep into the glowing blue rune. The golem froze, its obsidian eyes fading to dull black. It collapsed in a massive pile of rubble. They had won, but the victory was costly. The fight had been messy and Seraphina was visibly exhausted. They approached the Sunstone. It radiated an almost blinding, pure energy that felt like a healing balm after the constant darkness of the cursed wastes. "We must perform the cleansing ritual now," Seraphina said, her voice urgent. "The Sunstone has been corrupted by the selfish desires of my family. It must be made pure before it can be used to shield the world." She produced a small leather-bound book with ancient symbols. She guided Kale to place the Sunstone between their joined hands. "Your blood is the conduit for purification, Kale. The magic of the bond will ensure your life force is not drained." Using the obsidian dagger, Seraphina cut a vein in her wrist, letting a steady stream of her dark, potent blood flow onto the Sunstone. The stone hissed and the golden light dimmed slightly, struggling against the dark, corrupting force of her blood. Kale followed suit, cutting his own wrist and letting his pure, warm human blood mix with hers on the Sunstone. As their two bloods, one dark and ancient, one light and pure, mingled and reacted on the surface of the Sunstone, the blood bond erupted with a force stronger than ever before. Kale felt his mind flood with an overwhelming mix of Seraphina's history, her regret, and her fierce love for the world she was trying to save. The Sunstone pulsed fiercely. The darkness vanished, and the crystal flared with a glorious, blinding light, now wholly pure and potent. The ritual was complete. They had the Sunstone. They had survived the crypt. But as they looked down at their joined, bleeding wrists, the line between Warbride and Queen, captive and protector, had blurred completely. The bond had merged their destiny in their hearts. With the Sunstone of Lyra safely concealed, its golden, pulsing light contained in a magically sealed velvet pouch, Kale and Seraphina began their journey home. The return trip was marked by a fragile, almost domestic intimacy that was more dangerous than any monster they had faced. The blood bond had fully matured during the ritual. The constant flow of emotion and sensation between them was now seamless. Kale knew when Seraphina was in deep thought, and she knew when he was experiencing a moment of quiet melancholy for his lost human life. The shared connection was a double-edged sword. It provided perfect communication but also terrifying vulnerability. One evening, resting in a hidden grotto, Kale found Seraphina struggling to sleep, plagued by images of her ruined past, the Elder Ones. Kale, without a word, simply placed his hand on her unarmored shoulder. Through the bond, he deliberately pushed a feeling of calm, grounded human strength into her mind. Seraphina tensed, surprised by the unsolicited comfort. But she didn't pull away. "You use the bond with a delicate touch, mortal," she murmured, her voice husky. "We share a shield, lady," Kale replied softly. "If one of us is weak, the whole shield cracks. I need my commander rested." This was their new dynamic. A love forged not in tenderness, but in mutual survival and shared trauma. They were a deadly, perfect unit, but their bond was built on the world's need, not their own free will. As they neared the borders of the Kaelan Empire, the bond began to pick up static, interference that Kale recognized as Seraphina's extreme stress. "Varric," Seraphina hissed, stopping abruptly in the twilight woods. The Bond is picking up the chaos he is sowing. He hasn't usurped the throne, but he has spread venom. Varric had used Seraphina's prolonged absence to his advantage. He had publicly declared that Seraphina had fled the Empire, a sign of her weakness, and had taken Kael, a mortal, as a lover, a scandalous insult to the vampire code. The crowning blow, Varric had captured Ilara, Kael's former healer, and publicly declared that the moment Seraphina returned, Kael would be forced to choose between his vampire bond and his human loyalty. "He knows my weakness," Seraphina said grimly. "He knows I need the Sunstone to prevent the world's end, and he is forcing a confrontation that will make me choose between my strategic goal and your emotional stability." Kael's blood boiled. Varric was forcing him to betray Seraphina, the one person who could protect the world. Just as they finalized their strategy for a discreet, strategic entry back into the Citadel, they were met by a dark figure. It was Lyra, the leader of the Shadow Hand resistance cell Kael had spared in Lyra. She was cloaked and alone. She had used the chaos of Varric's power play to track Kael. "General Kael," Lyra whispered urgently, ignoring Seraphina entirely. "We heard the rumors. You sold your soul, but you saved our people in Lyra. Now we must save you." She handed him a folded piece of parchment. It was a detailed map of a secret underground network beneath the Citadel, tunnels used by the original human builders. "Varric has fortified the Citadel's main gates. You cannot enter through the front. Use these tunnels. They lead to the old king's chambers, which connect directly to Seraphina's private tower," Lyra urged. Seraphina watched the exchange, her expression completely unreadable. Kael looked at Lyra, then at the map, and finally at Seraphina. He knew Lyra was giving him a genuine avenue of escape and a chance to bypass Varric's trap. But he also knew that entering the Citadel through secret human tunnels would look like a betrayal to Seraphina's court. "We thank you, Lyra," Kael said, accepting the map, his voice firm. "But my path lies through the gates of the Citadel. I will not sneak into my own home." Lyra looked devastated. "You choose the vampire over your freedom? She is a monster, Kael." "She is the world's last chance," Kael corrected, his eyes hard. "Now go. Do not interfere. Your resistance will have its moment, but not yet." Lyra vanished into the shadows, leaving Kael holding the map, the physical proof of his ongoing human loyalty. Seraphina did not question Kael about the exchange. She knew he had refused a chance for freedom. That was proof enough of his renewed loyalty to the bond. "Varric is waiting for us to enter the Citadel through a vulnerable point so he can ambush us and claim the Sunstone," Seraphina concluded. "But we will give him exactly what he expects, a vulnerable entrance." Kael and Seraphina devised a brilliant, deadly strategy. They would use the element of the bond itself as a weapon. They marched straight to the main Citadel gates. Varric, flanked by his personal guard, was waiting. "Ah, the Shadow Wing returns," Varric mocked, his voice echoing in the courtyard. "And you bring your little mortal consort. I trust the ritual was satisfying?" Seraphina, standing tall in her armor, her wings slightly flared, radiated cold fury. "Lord Varric, you have violated the sacred law by challenging my authority in my absence. You will pay the blood price. I merely protected the throne from a foolish conquest and a weak mortal bond," Varric countered. "The court agrees, the blood bond must be broken. And I shall do it myself." Varric gave a silent signal. Hidden archers on the parapets aimed their powerful, magical arrows, not at Seraphina but at Kael. The plan was simple: kill the bondmate, and the shockwave of pain would incapacitate Seraphina, allowing Varric to claim the Sunstone and the throne. The archers released their deadly volley. The courtyard was paralyzed in a moment of deadly silence. The archers' magical arrows, tipped with crystallized sunlight, lethal to vampires and designed to shatter the blood bond, flew straight towards Kael. Kael, pinned in the open, felt the panic of his imminent death, but the sensation was instantly overwhelmed by a terrifying surge of cold, primal fury radiating from Seraphina through their link. She acted not as a queen or a general, but as a predator defending her most vital possession. Before the arrows could reach Kael, Seraphina launched herself forward. She didn't use her wings to fly away, she used them as a shield. With a deafening roar, she enveloped Kael in the massive span of her shadow wings, cocooning him completely. The arrows struck her wings and her back armor with terrible force. The crystallized sunlight didn't pierce her, but the impact sent a psychic shockwave of blinding, agonizing pain straight into Kael's mind via the bond. Kael screamed, clutching his head, feeling the mirrored impact across his own spine. Seraphina was injured, and the bond was magnifying her suffering 100-fold inside him. Yet Kael knew he was alive because of her. Varric, shocked that his ambush failed, roared a command to his guards. Kill the mortal. Break the bond. Seraphina slowly lowered her injured wings, her breathing shallow, but her eyes burning with a cold, absolute rage. The bond's magnified pain had pushed Kale beyond fear, replacing it with a focused, destructive power. Varric, Seraphina's voice was low, deadly, and layered with the echo of ancient vampire command. You dared attack the sacred bond. You forfeit your right to the blood price. You will simply die. Kale stepped out from behind Seraphina, drawing his blades. His focus was absolute. He and Seraphina were now fighting as one deadly consciousness. He's mine, Kale stated, meeting Varric's gaze. He is a disease in your kingdom. I will cut him out. The fight began. Varric, relying on brute force and dark magic, lunged at Seraphina. But Kale was there first. Kale used his speed, his agility, and his detailed knowledge of vampire weaknesses, all amplified by the bond. Seraphina, though wounded, used her immense blood magic to create distractions and control the field. As Varric focused a deadly blast of dark energy at her, Kale intercepted the blast, the sunstone hidden on his person momentarily drawing in the dark energy, shielding them both. Kale realized the truth. The sunstone was now linked to the bond, acting as a secret third power source. The dual attack overwhelmed Varric. Seraphina, seeing an opening, used her most powerful forbidden magic, a psychic attack amplified by the blood bond, to flood Varric's mind with his own darkest fears and betrayals. As Varric screamed, momentarily paralyzed, Kale saw his chance. He darted in not to stab Varric in the heart, but to slash the jugular vein, a move taught to him by Seraphina herself, a strategic, mortal kill that didn't invoke complex magic. Varric collapsed, his blood staining the citadel's stone floor. The threat was over. Lord Cashin, the ancient ritualist who had been watching the entire spectacle from the throne room entrance, stepped forward. He knelt before Seraphina. The bond has proven its strength, my lady, Cashin stated, his voice filled with awe. The traitor has been judged by your combined strength. The court submits to the Shadow Wing and her consort. The remaining vampire guards of Varric's faction immediately laid down their arms, terrified by the sheer unified power of the bondmates. The victory was complete, but Kale was staggering. The combined pain of the magical attack and Seraphina's wounds was too much. He collapsed onto the cold stone, the world swirling around him. Seraphina rushed to his side, her regal armor forgotten. She knelt over him, her eyes wide with fear, not the fear of a queen for her possession, but the deep, primal terror of a mate for his survival. Kale, the bond must heal you. Hold fast, she commanded, pressing her bleeding hand to his chest, forcing her potent, healing vampire blood directly through their link. Kale felt the agonizing pain recede, replaced by a cold, rushing energy. He was healing too fast, too unnaturally. He looked up at her, grasping her face between his bloodied hands. Why did you shield me? Your wings, the sun-tipped arrows. Seraphina's breath hitched, a deeply human sound of pain and confession. Because if you die, I will break. The pain would shatter me. And the world needs the sunstone. I need you. She lowered her head, pressing her forehead against his, their physical and psychic pain merging in a silent, desperate confession. I tried to use the bond as a chain, Kale, she confessed in a ragged whisper. But it has become the only piece of my soul I have left. You are no longer just my warbride. You are my equal. We rule and we fight together. The fight had not only killed Varric, it had killed the barrier between them. The captive and the conqueror were gone, replaced by two fiercely bonded partners facing a common, terrifying enemy. With Varric eliminated, the internal threat was crushed, but the external threat was intensifying. Kale and Seraphina now ruled the Kaelan Empire as equal partners, a dynamic the vampire lords had never witnessed. Kale was the chief strategist and commander of the joint human-vampire military forces, while Seraphina was the magical and political sovereign. The first thing they did was use their authority to dismantle Varric's cruelties. Kale formally met with the captured members of the Shadow Hand, including Lyra. He didn't offer them freedom but a choice: join the fight against the Elder Ones or remain imprisoned. Lyra, seeing Kale's power and Seraphina's genuine shift in focus, agreed to the alliance, providing the vampires with crucial knowledge of the human realm. Seraphina, meanwhile, concentrated on preparing the Sunstone of Lyra. The artifact, cleansed by their mixed blood, now radiated pure golden energy, but its activation required a massive, continent-wide magical nexus. A nexus that was about to be exploited by their enemy. The first sign of the impending catastrophe was terrifying. The vibrant, blood-red moon began to turn a sickly, curdled purple. Lord Cashin rushed into their war room, his ancient face etched with fear. My lady, the shadows are thickening. The ancient prophecy speaks of this. The turning of the moon is the moment the Elder Ones breach the dimensional veil. Seraphina's mind flooded Kale's with urgent data through the bond. They are coming through the nexus point, the highest magical concentration on the continent, the ruins of my ancestral home. They had to activate the Sunstone at that nexus point, in the heart of the ruins, before the Elder Ones could fully manifest. Kale, we go now, Seraphina commanded, already donning her war armor. We will take a small elite force. Lyra's human fighters know the terrain around the ruins better than anyone. They will be our vanguard. We activate the Sunstone, Kale confirmed, strapping on his armor. But if the bond is what cloaks us and the Sunstone is what shields the world, what price must be paid for the world's defense? Seraphina avoided his eyes. That question, Warbride, must wait until the shield is active. Their final army was a display of their new regime. Kale's most loyal human warriors and Lyra's seasoned resistance fighters marched alongside Seraphina's elite vampire guard. They entered the cursed, desolate ruins of Seraphina's ancient castle. The ruins were shrouded in a churning, sickly purple fog, the palpable manifestation of the Elder One's presence. The fog was laced with pure, consuming magic that sapped the strength of every living thing it touched, especially the magically potent vampires. Seraphina was immediately weakened. The fog, it feeds on my essence. Seraphina gasped, clutching her head, the agony transmitted directly to Kale via the bond. I can resist it better. Kale shouted. The purity of his human blood, coupled with the bond's cloak, gave him surprising immunity to the fog's draining effects. Kale took the lead, hacking his way through the ruins, shielding Seraphina with his own body. The former queen, who once commanded legions, was now entirely reliant on her mortal Warbride for protection. They reached the central courtyard, the nexus point. In the middle was a shattered stone altar, crackling with unnatural, purple energy. As Kale cleared the final debris, the dimensional veil tore open with a sound like tearing silk. The first of the Elder Ones manifested, a colossal, shifting silhouette of shadow, teeth, and impossible angles. It was immense, terrifying, and radiated an oppressive cold that threatened to extinguish all life. The Elder is here. It's too fast. Seraphina screamed, forcing the warning through the bond. Kale? Activate the Sunstone now. Place it in the Nexus. Kale pulled the glowing Sunstone from its pouch. The Elder One sensed the life-giving energy of the artifact and roared, sending a massive psychic wave of panic toward them. The shockwave slammed into Seraphina, who was already weakened by the fog. She crumpled, unconscious. Kale was completely exposed, holding the Sunstone, the entire burden of the war resting solely on his shoulders. He felt the terrifying emptiness in the bond, the loss of Seraphina's consciousness, a profound, agonizing isolation. He looked at the Elder One, then at the Sunstone. He had to complete the mission alone. He charged the Nexus point. Kale stood before the shattered altar, holding the glowing Sunstone of Lyra, with the first massive Elder One bearing down on him. Seraphina lay unconscious nearby, her wings slack, the purple fog draining her life force. The isolation in the bond was deafening, terrifying. The Elder One, a shifting vortex of darkness and malice, roared a psychic command. Surrender the light, mortal. Submit to the void. Kale felt the ancient, crushing weight of the creature's power. He was a mere mortal, but he was fueled by his training, his loyalty, and the fierce, protective love the blood bond had unexpectedly ignited. Kale knew he couldn't fight it physically. His only chance was the Sunstone. He leaped onto the shattered altar and slammed the Sunstone into the center of the dark, crackling Nexus point. The moment the Sunstone connected with the Nexus, it erupted. A glorious, golden pillar of pure, life-affirming light shot into the sky, tearing through the purple fog and momentarily banishing the oppressive darkness. The Elder One shrieked in agony. The golden light was pure pain to it. The light instantly began to heal the land and, more importantly, it hit Seraphina. Kale felt a massive jolt of energy through the bond. Seraphina's consciousness was returning, but she was still deeply weakened. The Elder One, seeing the Sunstone was activated, shifted its attack. It didn't aim for the stone. It lunged for the source of the protection, the bondmates. It launched a massive targeted blast of dark energy, aimed squarely at the unconscious Seraphina, intending to break the bond by killing the vampire lord. Kale had no time to think. He knew that if Seraphina died, the shockwave would instantly kill him, and the Elder One would destroy the Sunstone and breach the world. The only way to save her, the stone, and the world, was to use his own body as the shield. With a superhuman surge of will, Kale threw himself over Seraphina's motionless form, placing his own body directly in the path of the Elder One's deadly blast. The blast hit him. Kale roared as the immense, cold power of the Elder One slammed into him. It wasn't just physical pain, it was the sensation of his life force being ripped away, of his human soul being consumed by shadow. However, Kale's pure human essence, amplified by the blood bond and now directly touching the Sunstone's light, did the impossible. It reversed the magical flow. Kale's life force, the blood price, acted as a final deadly conduit. The Elder One's dark magic, instead of killing Kale, was channeled through his dying body and redirected into the Sunstone, instantly supercharging the artifact's shield and making the Elder One's presence painful and unstable. Kale felt his body collapsing, his life fading, but he also felt the glorious power of the Sunstone shield roaring to life. As Kale lay dying, his vision swimming, Seraphina's eyes snapped open. The bond was violently snapping between the surge of the Sunstone and Kale's fading life. She felt his sacrifice, the agony and the selfless love, transmitted into her soul. The Elder One, temporarily stunned and repelled by the amplified shield, began to retreat back into the dimensional tear. The world was saved. Seraphina crawled to Kale, tears, real human tears, streaming from her scarlet eyes. She saw the gaping, burning wound where the blast had struck him. He was minutes from death. No, Kale. The bond. It must save you. Seraphina sobbed, frantically pressing her hand over his heart, trying to force her potent vampire healing through the link. It is done, Seraphina, Kale whispered, his voice weak. The price was me. Don't break the shield. Save the world. Seraphina realized the terrible truth. The bond's original purpose was to share life. But now Kale was too damaged. If she tried to fully save him, the amount of power required would drain the newly active Sunstone shield, collapsing the global protection and letting the Elder Ones return. She was faced with the ultimate choice: save the world or save the man who had saved her. She looked at the Sunstone, radiating its life-saving light. She looked at Kale, fading rapidly. Her love, now fully realized, raw and desperate, won. With a final, shattering cry, Seraphina deliberately plunged the ritual dagger, the one from the thumbnail, into her own wrist, opening a deep vein. She pressed her gushing wound directly onto Kale's open wound, bypassing the magical bond and physically forcing her lifeblood, her vampire essence, directly into his body. I choose you, Kale. I choose us, she screamed, pouring her life force into him. I broke the curse and I will not let you die. The massive transfer of lifeblood was terrifying. The Sunstone shield flickered, dangerously weakened by the drain. But Kale's heart, touched by her powerful, desperate essence, began to beat, not with the rhythm of a mortal but with the cold, powerful pulse of the undead. Kale gasped, his eyes flying open. His human eyes were gone. They were now a fierce, clear scarlet. He had saved the world, but the blood bond was complete in the darkest way possible. He was no longer Kale Aerthos, the mortal Warbride. He was Kale, the vampire consort. 3 months later. The Sunstone shield was active, emanating a golden dome of protection over the continent. The threat of the Elder Ones was contained. In the citadel, Kale stood by Seraphina, looking out over the city. His pale skin, scarlet eyes, and unnatural speed marked him as a full vampire, Seraphina's equal in power and her eternal companion. The blood bond was no longer a chain, but an inseparable, shared destiny. Kale's moral center remained human, however. He used his position to establish a lasting, stable truce. Ilara, the healer, was freed and placed in charge of the human welfare in the Kalan Empire. Lyra and the Shadow Hand were granted official positions in the new government, ensuring human voices were heard. Kale and Seraphina were no longer Warbride and Conqueror, but King and Queen of the Twilight Empire. In the privacy of their chambers, Kale and Seraphina shared a quiet moment. Kale ran his newly cold fingers over the silver scar on Seraphina's arm, the original mark of the bond. You risked everything, Kale said, his voice deep and smooth, no longer human. The Sunstone, the world, you chose me. Seraphina turned, her eyes filled with an eternal, fierce love. The world is empty without the promise of our bond, Kale. You taught me the true meaning of sacrifice. She reached up and gently touched his cheek. You are bound to me now, not just by ritual but by the life I gave you. But your heart remains human, and that is what guides us. Kale closed his eyes, accepting his immortal fate. He knew the peace was fragile. The Elder Ones would return. The final scene shows Kale and Seraphina, clad in new matching black and silver armor, standing on the ramparts of the citadel. The golden shield of the Sunstone glows above them. They look out into the vast, dark world, preparing for the next, inevitable war. They are a perfect, deadly pair, the vampire queen and her immortal consort. Kale turns to Seraphina, his eyes shining with purpose. The shield holds, my queen. What is our next command? Seraphina smiles, a chilling, beautiful promise of future battles. The elder ones are merely waiting, my king, she replies, and we shall not be found wanting. The shot holds on their fierce, united gaze, ready for the eternal future they must now face together.